we have no real media in this state. Well, you have us.
It's really time for a parent revolution.
Never let a good crisis go to waste. That's what the left did with COVID in so many different ways.
Wind energy, especially offshore wind, is a big loser and just another government boondoggle.
Like, what's going on?
People are fed up. They lied to us then. They're lying to us now. They're assaulting our families.
What we do is we look at the lies of the left that they keep pushing out, that America doesn't work for black people. That is not true.
They want to now monopolize truth and say, truth is only what we say truth is. Damn the data, damn the science.
The key with science is it always needs to serve objective thinking. They just call anyone who challenges them a science deniers.
They're evil.
Shut up or we'll cancel you.
What we're going through is a cultural revolution.
This is big, and this is how change begins.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to the Ocean State Current Command Bunker. Now playing from In the Dugout, number 37, Mike Stenhouse.
Just another warm Wednesday. Wish it was a same day. Just another warm Wednesday. Wish it was a same day. Just another warm Wednesday.
Is Rhode Island government, when you think about the Washington Bridge fiasco, is our state government keeping its people safe, or is that a myth? And is it a myth, as we saw during the pandemic, when they said, hey, here are things you need to do to stay safe, when we found out afterwards, and as we were the first to tell you, guess what? Those mandates, those masks, those other policies they implemented were not safe. Today, on this Wuhan Wednesday, we destroy another government myth. And this one, probably the most serious of all. Is our government keeping us safe? Hey, folks, welcome to In the Dugout. Your host, Mike Stenhouse here. In just a minute, I'm going to bring on my special guest for today. His name is Casey Jones. He's a professional engineer out of Kansas. He's got a geotechnical focus. And he's been running, he's got a YouTube channel, and he covers all kinds of bridge issues and other civil engineering issues across the country, in fact, across the world, but with a focus on bridges. And he's been fascinated by the corruption and the lack of competence that we've seen here in Rhode Island when it comes to the Washington Bridge and the aftermath of its shutdown and eventual replacement. And he's produced something like almost 4 dozen videos just about the Washington Bridge saga in Rhode Island, as he calls it. And he's analyzing the collapse, the failure, and the government response to all of that. So he's an expert. He understands bridges. He consults with and works with departments of transportation throughout the whole country. So here to summarize his 2 years long running commentary on his own podcast about this Washington Bridge fiasco, let's meet our special guest, Casey Jones.
Great, Mike. Thanks for having me here. I really appreciate it.
And where are you coming to us from right now?
I'm based in Overland Park, Kansas.
Wow. Okay. I think I might have mentioned I'm going to be in Overland Park in just 2 weeks. So we'll look forward to seeing you there. Well, maybe not. I'll be pretty busy with my stuff there. All right, Casey, just a little bit, I kind of set up the interview, but just a little bit about your credentials and background for our viewing audience.
Yes, I run my own engineering consulting company. We perform construction phase testing of bridge foundations. So testing driven pile, drilled shafts, all the support that you don't see underneath the bridge, and if everything goes well as it should, people don't even think about the foundations. And a couple of years ago, I decided to start posting YouTube videos about engineering topics that I saw of interest. I'd catch a story, and I know we're going to talk about Washington Bridge, but something in the news that I could relate to, I had insight about, that wasn't being covered either correctly or fully by local or national media. So I started covering a lot of infrastructure related videos on my channel. It's been very interesting.
So you've covered everything from Thailand, I'm sure the Baltimore incident and the Washington Bridge. So you're looking at bridge incidents from around the world, right? Basically.
That's correct. Usually I'll do an initial video and maybe one or two follow-ups if there's additional information or developments. And surprisingly, I've done 45 videos about the Washington Bridge. I mean, from a
I was just going to
content
ask you that.
standpoint,
Is that by far your most covered topic on YouTube?
it is. I've kind of gone down the rabbit hole on it. I didn't expect to do that, but early on, given some of the misstatements, inaccuracies perpetrated by the director of the DOT there, I just said, I've got to focus on this. This is unreal. I mean, I work with DOTs all over the country. I routinely work with about 8 DOTs in the Midwest, and I've never seen a DOT behave as they have in Rhode Island. So it piqued my interest, to say the least.
Welcome to Rhode Island style corruption, Casey Jones. Have you, before we get into some of this, have you actually been out to Rhode Island to get a firsthand look at the bridge, or can you do all this pretty safely from afar?
Most of my work is done remotely. However, after a series of developments, I ended up going to Rhode Island to do some on-site investigating in March of 2025. And then I was invited back in November by Senate Minority Leader Jessica Dela Cruz.
Yep.
To be there during the hearings. I think hearing number 3 with RIDOT Director Alviti. So I've been out there twice.
And did you just witness or testify at those hearings?
I was just a witness. I was in the gallery. The only witness they had at that latest hearing was the RIDOT director.
Yeah, they at these oversight hearings, they tend not to get all the different points of view that are necessary to form a complete picture, and I'm sure you've learned that. All right, so you've done 45 videos, YouTube videos on your podcast. What's the name of your podcast?
Casey Jones, professional engineer.
Okay, so that's a name, and I guess we'll start at the beginning. I want you to, as I mentioned to you off air, I'm not an expert. I have not reviewed your material. I don't even really pay attention other than the headlines I see in the news, because it's just the same old government incompetence and corruption that we're so used to around here. But let's go back to the beginning, I guess. I mean, have you commented on like some of the inspections that probably missed some of the early signs going on? What can you tell us about that?
So I've covered a variety of topics related to this bridge saga, as I call it. So what initially caught my attention was when they made the emergency closure on December 11th, 2023. I mean, it was very disruptive. They closed it around 4 or 5 p.m. on a Monday during rush hour. It was chaos. You know, it had cars backed up through residential neighborhoods. It was highly disruptive. And RIDOT Director Peter Alviti comes out at these early press conferences claiming that some extraordinary event happened to break these anchor rods. And I'm looking at the pictures they present and seeing these rusty rods. And it's like, well, no, these things rusted in half. I mean, they may have broke after half of it was corroded away. And so I just, right off the bat, I saw the demeanor and what I consider to be unsubstantiated claims made by this director. And I thought, well, wow, there's a real story here. I mean, I interface with DOT directors at different times throughout my career, and I don't see them act this way. And
well,
so
I would assume most DOT directors are not union bosses, if you would. Would that be true?
Yeah, I found that out later, that he has a strong affiliation with the local labor union there.
Yeah. He may not be a boss himself, but he is very, very tightly involved. Yep. And unions, as you probably have learned, run this state, especially when it comes to spending money on projects, whether it's a private sector union or a public union. The more money that gets spent, the more they get their share. So that's why we spend so much around here and waste it.
Yes.
So going back to what you said, so right away, if I can put it into my words, again, I'm coming at this as a naive guy here, so correct me if I'm wrong. But right away, you saw the pictures. Something didn't just snap. The rust said to you, this is a long process. Many years this has been going on, probably. And then it got to a point where it weakened and broke. And why didn't anyone notice this years before? Is that a good summary?
That's correct. And if you just take a step back and just in my own experience, or just as a person that travels the highways of the United States, how many examples can you think of somebody having a bridge that's in service, tens of thousands of vehicles going across it, 100,000 vehicles a day going across the bridge saying, oh, wait a minute, we got to close it because we don't think it's safe. That's an extraordinary circumstance. And the explanations were nonsensical to me. You know, if you're going to say that there was an extraordinary event, you better have evidence. Did they have a scale of an overloaded truck or videos of an overloaded truck? You know, what evidence did they have to support that initial contention? And of course, you knew, at least I knew, it was utter hogwash. And here we are over 2 years later, they never produced that evidence. And there's other documentation that's come to light that showed that the rod corroded.
Yeah, to the contrary, the rust showed that it was a probably multi-year, if not decade-long corrosive process, right? So when it comes to bridge inspections, what normally should be taking place such that this kind of corrosion should have been discovered?
Well, when you put a bridge into service, that is, you build a bridge and you open it to traffic, there are periodic inspections that are conducted for the bridge to make sure critical elements, things that go to support the bridge, are in good, serviceable condition. And to the extent that there are deficiencies, a list is compiled, and then you expect the DOT to do repair and maintenance to restore those critical items of the bridge. So not only was the narrative nonsense in terms of, oh, this an extraordinary event that we can't tell you what it is, must have broken the rods, but it also pointed out immediately, with something that takes years to develop, why wasn't this caught in earlier inspections? And that was one of the things too that was I thought was inaccurate, because they said that not only was it an extraordinary event, but it happened from the time of the last inspection of July 2023 to when we accidentally, in essence, discovered it in December 2023. So
all right,
that just didn't add up.
but weren't there critical warning signs before this quote extraordinary event, and that were just either ignored or privately downplayed? I kind of remember reading something about that.
Yeah, I think there was anecdotal information. Certainly after the fact, I worked with a company called Value Space that did satellite imaging to identify whether there were areas of the bridge that had excessive movements, and they coincided with the areas that were later found to have broken anchor rods. In fact, when I released that video, Governor McKee was calling me out in a press conference and didn't use my name, but it was clear who he's talking about, and he was criticizing outside people, and how dare somebody from outside the state make a comment about their bridge. And I thought, this guy is really thin-skinned and defensive. And I think
they all live in cocoons, yeah.
But I must be onto something if he's acting so defensively. So if you believe the story that was put out there by the DOT, there was ongoing work to rehabilitate this bridge. And a person that was associated, apparently a mystery young engineer that we were told, saw the bridge deck bouncing around more than you would expect, and then went underneath the bridge and, behold, the broken anchor rod. Now, anecdotally, I've got other evidence that points to the possibility that they have known well before that it was actually broken. Trying to lay your hands on definitive documentation with this DOT is extremely difficult.
All right. So let me ask you this, just kind of yes or no questions here. So is it your opinion, or do you have evidence that they knew there was some corrosive problem going on years before the extraordinary event?
there's this, I have a strong suspicion that they knew. I don't have direct corroborating evidence.
And is it your suspicion that they knew about the broken tie rod before they announced it? Or do you think
Again,
that was...
that's another suspicion, because the catwalks that were used to access this location of the bridge that led to the discovery of the broken rods were in place for years.
So
it's not like they had to get a special piece of equipment. Like they saw something, hey, let's go check, let's rent this piece of equipment so we can do inspect. No, they saw something and they used a catwalk that was already there for years.
So what I'm getting at is do you believe, this is your opinion, that there was enough reason to have concern over the structural integrity of that bridge, that they knew about it to some degree, corrosive or broken, and put thousands and thousands of motorists, whether Rhode Island or passing through, at risk by ignoring it?
In my opinion, there's a lot of circumstantial indications that would lead to that possibility for sure. Just the fact that the nearby Henderson Bridge was completed and open to traffic a week before roughly this closure was done. Just a lot of anecdotal information. There's this ongoing paper trail of Hardy doing work and doing things that they hadn't completed during a 2019 rehab that I believe Rhode Island DOT knew about. So there's all these circumstantial things pointing to knowing of a problem, doing rehab work, but not finishing it, suddenly being in the midst of rehab and saying, oh, now we got to tear the bridge down. I mean, it's just a bizarre set of circumstances.
Is rehab the same as fixing a known problem, or is it rehab just something that routinely happens when you say rehab?
Rehab implies, in my mind, a more extensive amount of work. It's not like you spot one thing and go fix it. There's several things that require in-depth work over a protracted period of time. So the rehab work that they were doing was part of a $64 million contract. And they were halfway into that when they discovered apparently this broken anchor rod, which ultimately
was because of known issues with the bridge, not routine maintenance.
That's correct.
All right. So to some degree, they recognized there were deficiencies with the integrity of the bridge, but not the critical one. Now, is this bridge? I did a little research and I just got a few notes that I don't understand. That's why we have you on. That said, this bridge has a unique design, post-tension segmental concrete, that normally would require more frequent inspections. Is that your understanding of the situation? And did this bridge undergo more frequent inspections, if that's true?
Well, they were already inspecting it at a regular basis, I think once or every year or 2 years, because the bridge was rated as structurally deficient or poor condition. So it was already at a increased frequency of inspection. But the other part of what you led into with that question is this narrative that the Rhode Island DOT's put out there, that this was some freakish design, oddball Frankenstein bridge, it inherently couldn't be maintained. And that's just nonsense.
Right. They tried to blame it on the original design engineers, right?
Which I think was highly unethical of Director Alviti. I mean, Rhode Island DOT knew what they were getting with that bridge. They reviewed the design, they paid for it, they watched the construction, and then they used it and had it open to traffic for over 50 years. Most bridges in that era were designed for around a 50-year lifespan. And there were deficiencies noted for these post-tension elements that go back to the early 90s, this Lichtenstein report. And that the engineers who compiled that report recommended some in-depth non-destructive testing to evaluate the condition of these strengthening elements, as it were. And it appears that RIDOT never did that. And that was one of the deficiencies.
Be clear,
that was
never did what specifically? Again, you're never did
okay.
what?
So there are these steel cables that go through the concrete portions of the bridge.
Yeah.
And they're tensioned to provide strength and stability to the bridge.
Okay.
And back in the early 90s, some of those elements were found to be corroding or to not have material filled around them. And the recommendation was, hey, you better look at the whole thing and make sure there's no problem. And apparently the DOT never did that.
Oh, okay.
And those were some of the deficiencies that were cited after the discovery of the broken anchor rod that led the DOT to say, we've got to replace this bridge. So it was some of the things that they found after the broken anchor rod apparently were there for decades.
All right, since you mentioned it, just based on what you know about what they say they found or what you've discovered that maybe other people have found, but based on the total picture, was it the right call to totally replace the bridge?
You know, it turns out there's some opinions on the other side of that. Rhode Island DOT attacked the original design.
Right.
And unbeknownst to them, one of the original design team members was still around, I believe in his mid 80s, Laszlo Sigmund. And he wrote several editorials to the Providence Journal saying, you know, what Rhode Island DOT is saying is utter nonsense. And his opinion was that they could have diverted truck traffic, so kept trucks off the bridge, but continued to use the bridge for vehicle traffic while they did emergency repairs for some number of years after that to keep the bridge in service. So it was of his opinion that, yeah, there was a path forward that didn't involve the immediate removal of the bridge. So I guess I'll put it this way. I'm not a structural engineer. I've reviewed the reports, and I'm not going to say definitively, you know, if the DOT isn't going to do the required maintenance and the required repairs, then by default, you have to replace a bridge that has those serious deficiencies. Did they examine viable alternatives fully? There's controversy on that. I mean, I've seen some decision making that they've made, for example, on whether to reuse the existing foundation that is contradictory and not adequately fleshed out. So I think in general, the DOT makes decisions that, to me, in my personal opinion, seem motivated by other things than sound engineering judgment.
Well, we're going to get to that in just 1 second. So, just before I make this kind of controversial statement that is my opinion, and right now, after overruns and inflation and everything else, this total project cost is roughly how much right now?
I think they're talking around $450 million at this point.
And that would be paid for by who?
80% by the federal government and 20% by the state government.
But either way, and this is my commentary, you can comment if you choose to. I know how things work in this state. Like I said earlier, the unions have a hand in almost any money that's spent, any major money that's spent because some union was pushing it. So I'll put it this way. I'll put it nicely. People like me have been around a lot. You know, we're left to question, well, I wouldn't be surprised if the unions got together with whoever, DOT, political officials, whoever else. Why would we do a 20, 30, $40 million repair when we could do a $500 million bridge replacement and all that extra money going to our union and our union members and our political war chest and all that? I'm ashamed to say that I honestly think they might do something like that. Do you even want to comment?
Yes, I think that's a fair suspicion. I mean, and many people have commented to my videos that, you don't see a politician's name on a bridge repair. You see a politician's name on a bridge replacement. And there's certainly more money to be spread around in a bridge replacement than in a repair. I think that's 100% true. And I think it's true across the country, quite honestly.
Really? Okay.
But to a different degree, a higher degree in Rhode Island. I think there's a tendency to say there's a perverse disincentive for people, DOT states, to maintain their bridges. When, let's let it fall down or nearly fall down, and then the feds are going to pay 80% for a replacement. Look at the Francis Scott Key Bridge. I've done several videos about that. It was obvious to any person, even just looking at that bridge, that they had these puny dolphins in front of the piers, these tiny things that maybe could stop a canoe from hitting the bridge, but nothing substantial like an ocean-going ship. And they didn't do anything about it for decades. And then the whole bridge gets taken out, and now they're talking about billions and billions of dollars for replacement.
All right, so the beauty of having you on and what you do is this Washington Bridge is not the only one you've covered. You've covered in depth, looked under the covers as best you could. That Baltimore Bridge, Thailand. I'm sure you looked at the one that just happened in China recently. And you've seen politicians and Department of Transportation, all the public officials react. How would you rate Rhode Island's level of accountability and transparency compared to what you've seen in other governments, in other states, and other countries?
Absolutely the worst. I mean, I wouldn't say you threw like other countries in. I mean, it might be on China level of lack of transparency with Rhode Island, but Director Alviti, I've made, like I said, 45 videos. When I was probably 15 videos in on this Washington Bridge, he goes on WPRO and suggests to the host Tara Granahan that my making videos was somehow illegal. I'm like, what? This guy's so far out of line. Now, in my neck of the woods in the Midwest, I do a lot of work in Iowa, and they actually were putting in a new bridge next to an old bridge that was still in service, about 100 years old. And because of the construction activity disturbed the foundation of the 100-year-old bridge, they had to close the old bridge down 2 years ahead of when the new bridge would be open. And it was a major hardship for the people in town there. But the DOT came out and said, this is what happened. This is what we're going to do about it. Totally open, totally transparent. And what do you get in Rhode Island? Extraordinary event. It broke between this time and this time, the 6-month window, which was nonsense. Oh, now we got to replace the bridge. Let's sue everybody involved for the last 10 years.
All right. So they're trying to shift the blame. They're trying to shift the blame, obviously. So let's just have a little fun. So on a scale of 0 to 10, 10 being the most, what is the level of accountability of Rhode Island Department of Transportation?
0, in my opinion.
What's the level what's the level of transparency?
Yeah, I would say absolutely 0. I could back this up, but we could go through it here, for your quick answers.
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
So I don't get my information just from the local media. I independently put in my own public records requests. They're called APRA requests in the state of Rhode Island, and they drag their feet. I figured out they average 1.5 public records requests a day for Rhode Island DOT. And so every time I submit a request saying, oh, due to the volume of requests, we're going to, they wait 20 days to respond, and then they give themselves another 20 days because they say they got such an influx of requests, which is nonsense. So they slow walk responding to my request. Things that that they have information on, in some cases tell me they have no information. I mean, and then they charge me money left and right. So that, and then they're just trying to stonewall me. Their point of contact, their spokesperson, Charles St. Martin, he will not answer any of my messages. Now, he'll answer local media there, but they're not asking the tough questions I'm asking, quite frankly. So
Are you aware?
that's
All right. Are you aware of anyone else asking tough questions like you are?
initially the local media was asking some pretty tough questions.
I'm talking
I
about
think
experts like you, experts, engineers like you.
not about the Washington Bridge. There's a local
Okay.
engineer that was critical of the Mount Hope Bridge
Yeah,
in
no.
terms of them not
Yeah, let's just stay on the
releasing.
Washington Bridge. All right. So we talked about accountability, 0, transparency, 0. Same scale from 0 to 10, 0 being none, 10 being as much as you could imagine. What do you perceive as the political interference in what should be a technical issue? How much in Rhode Island do you believe politics is interfering this whole process?
Well, politics it's all the way. It's the sole driver, I think. Uh, the engineering and the other narratives are have to kowtow to the political narrative, in my opinion. You know, when I started doing technical videos about this bridge, people would comment that it's corruption, it's corruption, it's corruption. And just from a circumstantial standpoint, I have to agree, in my opinion. It's
So,
the
so what I'm getting at, so on this Wuhan Wednesday broadcast, just like we saw with the pandemic, where politics, not science, not medical data, not actual reason, politics informed the government officials on how they would put this out to the public. The same, you see this kind of the same thing happening here, that politics is shaping the process, the narratives, the responses, and everything, rather than the science and the engineering.
Yes, I think this fits into your Wuhan Wednesday category for sure, because you know what was the big storyline with that? We're keeping you safe. We're going to do this, you're going to do that, and it's all to keep you safe. Well, they discovered this broken anchor rod on a Friday. They didn't close the bridge actually until Monday, but then it became apparent afterwards that this rod had been broken and there were many other serious deficiencies that went back for years. So were they keeping the public safe when they hadn't closed the bridge yet? And
Right, like I asked earlier, right?
and you know, they fumbled the initial bid package to get this bridge designed and replaced, so that baked in another year delay minimum. And now people are all jammed up in 6 lanes on a single bridge. They've got tow trucks staged out there because of all the wrecks. Is that safe? You know, it's for a lot of people, it's a white knuckle experience driving across that bridge.
So like I posited in my opening comments before you brought me on, the Wuhan Wednesday myth we're dispelling, just like it was the myth during the pandemic, is that our ocean state government is keeping the people safe. Is that a myth, Casey Jones?
I believe it's a myth for sure. and the other part of that myth, a subset of that, is that they have the people's best interest at heart. I don't believe that at all. They have their own political self-interest at heart.
And they have their union cronies, members and bosses' interests at heart. I believe that too. Okay. All right. So before we get into lessons and looking forward, is there anything else looking backward? I know you've done 45 videos, but just talk about 1 or 2 other key major takeaways you've discovered that I haven't asked you about yet.
I think in general, the way projects are administered by the DOT, since Director Alviti has been in that position for over 10 years now, he was appointed by, I believe, Gina Raimondo.
Mm-hmm.
He's gone to a model of almost exclusively awarding big projects through a design build delivery mechanism. So in other words, conventional delivery is the DOT, with either in-house or through a consultant, designs a bridge, puts the plans and specs out there for contractors to bid on, and the low qualified bidder is selected and they go do the work. Instead, with the design build, the DOT comes up with a scoring system like a beauty contest. And, you know, the swimsuit phase of the competition. Somebody says an 8 and somebody says a 9. Well, it's a numerical score, but it's based on subjective evaluations. And so they do the same thing with the bridge. So they control who's getting these contracts.
Of course they do.
And
Perfect.
very much
That's how they
so.
exercise their influence. Sure.
And they issue change orders left and right. The DOTs I am accustomed to working with are loath to issue change orders. It's usually seen as a screw up, or we don't want to spend the money, and they hand them out like Skittles, as far as I can tell, in Rhode Island.
I'm sure there's all these union project labor agreements involved as well, right? Are you familiar with all that?
Well, I mean, that's common on DOT projects, even in so-called red states, say Kansas. Most of those jobs are not union jobs, but they have to pay what they call prevailing wage rate. But in bigger markets like St. Louis or anywhere in the Northeast, you actually have union crews doing the work.
So if you can, I'll ask your opinion here, again, mostly based on, well, it's not even my commentary, it's the truth. If you can extrapolate what you saw happen with the Washington Bridge, you mentioned you've looked a little into the Mount Hope Bridge, but if you can look at take a bigger picture look at Rhode Island, would it be any surprise to you, and I'm sure you know this, that Rhode Island has consistently been ranked as having the worst bridges and roads in America and the most expensive, at the same time, most expensive bridges and roads per mile in America. In other words, just like in education, we pay some of the top dollar of any state in the country, yet we get some of the worst results.
Yes, I've done some Google searches about rankings of the highway system in different states, and Rhode Island's at the bottom, or like the very bottom or next to the bottom.
Yep.
And they spend a tremendous amount of money. From what I understand, Rhode Island is a recipient state for federal tax dollars, and I pay a lot of federal income tax, so I've got money going to Rhode Island.
Yes, you do.
And when you have the governor saying I have no business poking my nose into Rhode Island, I'll remind him that I pay tax dollars that goes to his state, and in many cases are wasted and abused, in my opinion.
There's no doubt about that. It's not just the initial building, but I mean, my goodness, I mean, you go around this state, there's construction crews working on streets because the pavement has either got potholes. Now, look, we live in a tough weather area here, the hot, the cold. I get all that, but still, so do other states. But it's just constant potholes, constant repairs, constant street shutdowns or detours or lane closures. On top of all that, it really, really gets frustrating around here. So, all right. Anything else you want to add before we kind of take a look forward?
Well, I think it could be that the way the Washington Bridge was handled by state government, the governor and the DOT, I think could be a microcosm for how other things are handled in the state. I'll let others make that decision. But that's why it's such a fascinating story. I'm staying with the technical stuff, but I've done videos pointing out what I consider irregularities in the contracting mechanism. And I have been disappointed by the local media really not tearing into this story more than they have. And so I've been waiting for national media to look into it, and that hasn't happened yet either. And I don't know what it's going to take for people. Most people want to take infrastructure for granted, and I get it. But that's a luxury that we're not going to really have.
It's not really a luxury, Casey. I mean, infrastructure development is one of the enumerated and necessary roles of government in our lives, to build the infrastructure to allow us to be prosperous and secure and free. That's really, if any, yet they do such a horrid job of it in this state. And they stick their nose into every other aspect of our lives. But if there's anything core, other than providing for the safety, through in our case, in the state case, police and whatnot, state police and It's to provide a safe and reliable infrastructure. I mean, I can't
Well,
think of anything else more fundamental to government than that, and yet we can't even come close to doing that well.
Well, yeah, what I meant by it's a luxury to take it for granted,
Okay,
when you want to be able to drive over a bridge and not think about when was the last inspection done? Did they actually implement repairs? Can I trust what they're saying about the bridge?
right.
Public faith in the DOT has been broken,
Oh,
and
yes.
and and the government there has done nothing to rebuild it with the public, in my opinion.
Well,
And
what, it's the same thing, whether it's election integrity, people don't trust our election system. See, I mean, every institution that government touches in this state, and even many of the private institutions, people are just frustrated. It's all corrupt. It's all, like I said, driven by special interests, in large part. And it's just, this bridge, and it's just sickening to think that people's lives could have been at risk here. Not just the convenience of going from one part of the state to the other, but their lives and safety could have been at risk. All right. So what it would be looking forward, what would be your lessons learned and recommended changes to this whole bridges and roads procurement, contracting, and implementation process?
Well, I think there has to be a top down reorganization of the Rhode Island DOT. I'm not a fan of Director Alviti. Just be nothing personal. It's just the way he's
Yes.
handled or mishandled, in my view, the Washington Bridge. I mean, he's gotten a pay raise since this all started, and he sits on all these other boards. I imagine he gets paid being on these other boards as well. I don't know for sure, but he's making a pretty good living. I think he's in his mid 70s. It's far be it from me to presume to tell somebody when they should retire, but there seems to be no effort to change the management at the top. To my knowledge, nobody's been fired or demoted as a result of this whole Washington Bridge fiasco. So you have to question, how serious are they about accountability when, from an outside perspective, there's been no repercussions. So,
No, and
yeah,
and to your earlier point, Casey, it's not just the DOT and the government that won't assume any accountability or responsibility, but you're right. Our local media will not hold. They might do a little story here or there, but they will not hold people accountable. We say all the time that if we had a real media in this state, that our state wouldn't be so bad off in so many years because somebody has to hold lawmakers and public officials accountable for the poor performance we have across the board. But this media, and not in any meaningful way anyway, they refuse to have any repercussions, to use your word. Um, so just give us some. We talked about the ratings and national. Just give us to close out here, based on everything you've seen across the world and the country. Just give us some perspective on where this Washington Bridge fiasco, kind of, I don't know if we use the word ranks, but just some perspective to put everything in perspective compared to what else you see.
yeah, what you have going on with the Washington Bridge is very atypical. The vast majority of bridge replacement projects are planned years in advance. I can't think of a single episode where somebody closed a bridge on a Monday evening during the commute and then came out and told people, we're going to get this thing repaired and open the traffic in maybe 3 months, and then, oh, never mind, we're going to have to tear it down. Don't worry, we're going to rush out a big replacement request for proposal. Oh wait, nobody bid on it. uh you know it's
All right,
just
so
it's
all
amateur
right, so that
hour.
leads me
I
to one
think
more ranking. That leads me to, and then I'll let you finish. So let's also rate the level from 0 to 10, the level of competence. That's competence right there. What's the level of confidence that you've seen in DOT related leaders in this state?
so I want to clarify. I think there's great people at the DOT, but
Okay.
it's not with their upper management. I would give their upper management a 0 in terms of competence. I mean, the results speak for themselves. They really do. And so to divert from that performance record, they have to say things like, hey, we've got the best bridge builder in the world working on the replacement. They're referring to Walsh. Well, Walsh is, by dollar volume, the biggest bridge contractor in the United States, and they're very good. I've worked with them on numerous projects, but it's like saying that McDonald's serves the best food because they serve the most. And anyway, there's just, what I've seen in the past is that the DOT says something nonsensical, or the governor says something nonsensical about the bridge. It causes barely a stir in the local media, and people go on as business as usual. And then I'm the monkey wrench that they're not used to, posting YouTube videos. This is a new thing. And people, these government officials that like to operate like this, the internet is going to change things. It's going to take a while.
Yeah, well,
but the power brokers and the information brokers in the local media, they're not going to have the death grip on these stories anymore. I think there's some very good people in the local media, but I think they've got producers and editors that are spiking stories, that, that old expression. I've offered to share source material with various investigative journalists. I've had some pretty groundbreaking findings, and it's crickets.
Yep. Yep. I got it. So we've got a 0, 0, 0, 10. 0 accountability, 0 transparency, 0 competence in leadership, and 10 for political interference. That's not a very good formula, is it?
You wouldn't want to play on that team.
All right, Casey Jones, that's a good way to wrap it up. I hope we'll want to drive across that bridge in the future. When do you think they'll get this thing done?
Well, right now they're telling people November 2028. I think that's pretty iffy. I really do. I think you got, probably 2.5, 3 more years of this.
Change orders will probably push it up another few $100 million, I would think, too, probably.
Good possibility.
All right, Casey, thank you so much for your time. Keep pushing out those YouTube videos. If you have any major findings, discoveries, or analysis, or information that you put out there, and you're still hearing crickets on the media, contact us, and we'll get you back on. We have to rely on guys like you to give us this information, because we don't know how to evaluate this on our own. So thank you very much for joining me, Casey Jones.
Thanks, Mike. Great talking with you.
All right, I hope we'll do it again soon. And to you, our viewing audience, thanks for tuning in. So until next game, Mike Senos out. See you then.